So some concluding thoughts about what I learned about this deck and what I would do differently. The workshop matchup was not sealed, so I need to think about that some more and test it some more pretty rigorously. That's the first thing. However, I did feel comfortable playing against blue-based control decks. These artifact-based control decks like Jace Raider and Tezzerator, or Tezzerator rather, that runs Jace. I tend to think of them as actually a tier 2 deck in Classic. That was what we played in the second match that I have revealed, that I recorded. Um, I feel in general like I'm comfortable taking those out. The mana drains really help push my counter magic, and after sideboard, the red elemental blasts, uh, and also sometimes the sower or the energy fluxes. I basically have a lot of options against those sorts of decks, depending on exactly how they want to win. Um, the general shell of the deck. So let's look at this without the hammer mages, because the hammer mages are essentially a metagame choice. I actually think it's quite strong. I played a version of a deck like this in the second Classic Quarter League Invitational from last year, and I did pretty well, but I didn't run into Shop very much, or Affinity. When I did, I lost. So figuring out how to turn the deck into something that can beat those decks, but still has the control shell that I like, including a Trinket Mage package, that's really the question. So some cards that I could consider are Glenelendra, Thirst for Knowledge, Sensei's Divining Top, an additional piece of Graveyard Hate for the main. I'm not sure what it would be. Probably a Grafdigger's Cage or a Tormod's Crypt, but probably not. I don't think I would include that. Glenelendra Archmage, did I mention? I think I did. Venser, Shaper Savant, and additional Jaces. I think all those are candidates. And so I should be thinking about those before entering in DEs. But for DEs, what decks have been winning recently have been workshop-based prison decks, not running Smokestack like the one we faced today, but also Affinity. And Hammer Mage is strong against both these decks, even though they have methods of dealing with Hammer Mage, including Revoker, Phyrexian Revoker. So that's all stuff to think about. Some things I might want to cut from the main include one Hammer Mage, but probably not, even though he's kind of weak. It includes maybe this Into the Royal, though I actually find this card versatile and strong. The Shackles, I could consider cutting from the main and putting mainly in the sideboard, or only in the sideboard, rather. There should be another Trinket Mage in here. He escaped. And maybe one of the Frost Titans, though I actually think it's pretty good as a kill con, and it can be pitched to force in matches where it's bad. Could also cut one of the Mana Drains, a Brainstorm sometimes, though I think it's fairly strong in this matchup with the number of shuffle effects I have. And maybe a Pithing Needle. So those are all cards I would consider cutting. The Lotus Petals are tricky. They aren't quite lands, but the deck only runs 23. I could cut one and play another land. I could add in another if I wanted to make my matchup more robust when I'm on the play against Sphere effects and against Lodestone Golems in the Affinity and Shot matchups. But I think they do enough to warrant testing some more with 3 of them. I may consider going down to 2 or cutting them entirely if I feel like I don't need it. So the question is like, is Lotus Petal better or worse than running something like Main Deck and Null or Steel Sabotage? Or maybe one of these Lotus Petals is worse. It's hard to say. Lotus Petals are also good against, or with Engineered Explosives, because they can occasionally allow you to cast a 3 or 4 mana explosives. Also, do I want to be running more Cavern of Souls? Those are questions. In the sideboard, I get the sense that Inferno Titan is probably not going to make the cut, though I do kind of like a 1 of Sower. Whether the energy flux are enough is another question. Flux, Flucase, the energy Flucase. And the Shackles, whether that's even good remains to be seen. Mental Misstep is an okay sideboard card in my opinion. I think it's good in most matchups, but it's not very strong against Workshop, which has been winning lately, because the only 1-drop it runs in the main is oftentimes Soul Ring. Spell Snare is good in a lot of matchups, but then in other matchups it isn't very good at all, or when you're not on the play. So bringing this in seems a variable enough condition that I leave it in the sideboard. All in all, I'm not sure what I would do yet. There are a couple cards that I recognize as more questionable than I used to, and I also recognize that the main plan of the deck, running a series of Hammer Mages and Magi, the Moon, against Workshop, isn't quite as robust as I thought it would be, at least against versions of Aggro Shop like the one I played against. So I'll continue to play around with this deck in my spare time, and you might see me run it into a DE, though I'm not entirely sure about that. I'm also working on Battle of Wits and a black-white combo deck that a version of which Stealth Pants, the streamer, talked about on our site. It's a modern deck actually. I'm trying to see if it's worth converting. Probably isn't very good in Classic. But I look forward to playing incarnations of this deck and others in DEs. And in the end, was this deck playable? Yeah, I guess so. So was this playing the unplayable? I don't know, kind of. I feel like, as far as the series goes, Hammer Mage and Frost Titan and Inferno Titan are unplayable enough in the format in question to call this a serious playing the unplayable. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know if this is the sort of thing you like to see on our site. Obviously, DEs are better than playing matches in two-man queues and playing tournament practice, but if I can get serious matches in those places against members of the community who would appear in DEs, I think that's more or less sufficient. And thanks for watching.